What's up, Ragin Nation? How's it going? This is Alex Yu, and you're watching the TF Movie Show. This is just a web series we're talking about the Transformers live-action movie franchise. This is episode number 32, and in this episode, we are going to talk about box office. In the previous episode, we talked about Rotten Tomatoes. Now we're going to talk about box office, and the main reason why I believe that this is a significant topic of discussion, especially for a film like Bumblebee, is because they are on two bipolar opposite ends of the spectrum. We got a high Rotten Tomatoes score and a low box office take, especially for Transformers live action film standards. Typically, you would see a low Rotten Tomatoes score and a high box office take. But now that they changed gears, switched up directors, and pretty much gave this film a kind of, sort of soft reboot, it's got a completely opposite result. And that's what we're here to talk about. Well, I talked about the Rotten Tomatoes score. Now we're going to talk about box office. Now, the main reason why that this is a big deal besides what I just talked about is because these films have made monstrous amounts of dollars. I mean, look at Transformers Dark of the Moon and Age of Extinction. Both of them are sitting pretty at 20 and 23 in the ranking of the top highest grossing films of all time. Transformers Dark of the Moon at number 20 at $1.12 billion. Transformers Age of Extinction at ranking number 23 at $1.1 billion worldwide. That's a pretty huge deal. And now when you look at the opening weekend of Bumblebee, that's last weekend, we got $21 million domestically. That's just North America alone. Let's look at the rest of the world. Last weekend, it made $21 million in North America, $31 million internationally, and for a total box office take on the first weekend of $52.1 million against a $135 million production budget. Now let's talk about that production budget, $135 million. That's considered low for a Transformers film, but it's still a high budget production, a big budget production. Transformers was made, and I'm talking about the 2007 film, that was made for $145 million. That's only $10 million less than the first film. But the sequels all went into the range of $200 million with a production budget that high. You gotta match it with a marketing budget because the studios want to have a good return on investment. They gotta market the hell out of their $200 million picture. So what they do is they try to, and this is a general guideline, is that they match the production budget with the marketing cost. So $200 million spent production, let's match it with $200 million in marketing. That brings it up to $400 million. Now, is that all that costs into making a movie? No, you got to pay the theaters. You got to pay a percentage that goes to the theater chains that actually have a residual agreement for the box office take. So they will get a percentage of that box office take. And what about the actors who have deals? They have their own personal deals which say that, hey, I'm not going to take a $10 million paycheck. I would like to take $5 million and a 10% cut of the box office. They got to pay that. And that's why Transformers Last Night, while it made $600 million, is not a huge, it's not a success. It's definitely not a success, but it's not a failure. $600 million still covers the production, still covers the marketing, and it covers a bit of the theater costs and whatever residuals they decide to pay the actors and the directors and producers, whatever. All right, it broke even for the most part. Okay, so it's not a failure. Bumblebee is not a failure, and I'm going to explain why. A lot of people are telling me and tweeting at me and saying, oh man, it's a shame that Bumblebee is a flop. It's not. If you telling me that Bumblebee is a flop, you do not know what you are talking about, and you did not look at the bigger picture. You're just looking what you see at face value on the opening weekend. We're now in the second week now, and this film has opened in other international markets. And so let's look at those second week numbers. Bumblebee is at $20.5 million on its second weekend in North America, and worldwide it has just covered its production cost. And why is that happening? It's because the film is opening up in other parts of the world. It is definitely not a flop by any means whatsoever. Do not call Bumblebee a flop because it is not, and that didn't even rhyme. But anyways, $156.8 million on its second weekend is a great thing. Now, we're not just talking about international markets here that determine on whether or not this movie makes more money. You got to also remember when this movie is released. This movie is released in a very significant but unique time. December is a time unlike the rest of the rest of the year, the 11 months. There are only really two big moments, two really significant moments in releasing movies. The summer and also December, the month of December, the Christmas holiday. The rest of the times are pretty standard. But then you have your summer blockbuster season, which is extremely competitive, and then you have the Christmas holiday season. And that's a very unique time. It's very different from the summer blockbuster season because there aren't that many movies released during that time. Usually it's just one big movie. But now we have several big movies. We got Bumblebee, we got Mary Poppins, we got Aquaman, which is a monster, a box office monster, and there's also Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse going into its the next couple of weeks. But there is a lot of competition in December, and if you know December like I know December and the studios know December, December is a very significant month, mainly because it's not just kids that are out of school, but there are a lot of adults that are on Christmas holiday, and because of that, you actually do not see significant weekly drops in the box office. If you look at the numbers, last weekend they made $21 million domestically. They made $20.5 million in the second week. There was little to no box office drop. Okay? Little to none. And this is a very standard thing for the month of December. And a lot of people don't realize that. December is very different from the rest of the year. And that is because everybody's on holiday. What are you going to do on the holiday? Go do something. Go out, watch a movie. So that's why Bumblebee, by any means, is no a failure. It's no flop. If you look at other movies like there, during the summer blockbuster season, this film could have dropped like 60 to 70% in its second week. But it's being released in December. And why is it being released in December? I'll explain why. 2 words. Star Wars. There is no Star Wars being released at this time. A lot of people are saying like, oh my God, Paramount made such a bad decision in releasing this film in December. No, they did not make a bad decision in releasing in December. They made a they made a good decision because a bad decision would have been leaving it to be eaten up alive in the summer blockbuster season when there's so much competition. In December is a perfect time, or rather, pretty much the best time because there's no Star Wars movie to compete with. Aquaman is part of the DC universe, but it's still 2 very, very different films. And there are a lot of Transformers fans out there. Yes, it is competition, and it's a significant chunk of competition that has been taken away from Bumblebee. But still, Bumblebee is getting really, really, really good word of mouth, and it hasn't been released in other parts of the world. And one of those big, significant factors is China. It won't be released in China until January 5th or January 6th. And that is going to be a pretty huge deal. Think about it. They've already made $157 million worldwide on its second week without the help of China. This film cost $135 million to make, and if we're going to go by the guidelines stating that they match the production budget with its marketing budget, let's say $270 million total cost. Heck, let's say $300 million total cost. They've already made half of that. What do you think China is going to make for Bumblebee? Well, the audiences in China, Transformers fans in China are a pretty huge number, and China is the biggest global market for films like this. What do you think is going to happen? Well, I think the only way to really determine that number is really finding out what China has contributed to the Transformers franchise in the past. Let's start with Dark of the Moon, since that's the film that made $1.1 billion. China contributed $165 million for Dark of the Moon. Now, this is because IMAX 3D. All right, they loved Avatar, which only came out in 2009, and the next best thing in the 3D market was Transformers: Dark of the Moon, especially because Michael Bay employed the same guys that worked on Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar, to work on Transformers: Dark of the Moon, and it was marketed that way. So the people in China that loved Avatar were definitely going to watch Transformers Dark of the Moon. So that's why we ended up with $165 million from China alone. And then you have a film that completely pandered to the Chinese market, Age of Extinction, which was shot in China and Hong Kong, $320 million. That's like a double of what Dark of the Moon made. And then there was Transformers The Last Night, which fell below box office expectations and took in $228 million. That's still a big deal, but still not as high as what it could have been, especially when compared to Transformers Age of Extinction. Now, there are a couple of factors that'll determine on how much China will be contributing to the box office take of Bumblebee. You got to keep in mind that, and this is all very, very technical movie jargon, and that is Age of Extinction was produced and distributed by various Chinese companies, such as, for Age of Extinction, China Movie Channel, Jiaflix Enterprises, Huaxia Film Distribution. These are companies that are helping promote Transformers, and they help help finance the film, and therefore they're going to market the hell out of it. Okay, because they want to get a higher return on investment. Transformers Last Night did not receive that much help. Okay, while it was 3 companies that helped out in Age of Extinction, it's only really 1 company that helped out with Transformers Last Night, Huahua Media, which signed a 3-year deal with Paramount Pictures. Unfortunately, they actually cut their ties with Paramount Pictures, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of the films that they invested in weren't really giving them a high return on investment. Transformers Last Night and XXX, The Return of Xander Cage, were the 2 biggest films that actually gave them a decent box office take, but everything else that they invested in, like for example, Suburbicon, Baywatch, and Mother. So, well, that wasn't really a good thing, and because of that, Huahua Media decided that they're going to cut their ties with Paramount Pictures. So, because of that, the Bumblebee production needed to look to somewhere else. There's another Chinese company that was going to help produce and distribute their film, Tencent Pictures rather. You would see their logo when you watch Bumblebee. Tencent Media is a production partner from China. So of course, with that being said, they have another company that's going to help market their film in China. So that's definitely a great thing. So, but you know, things changed. Things definitely changed. So that is definitely going to affect the box office take in China. And not only that, maybe a lot of fans in China really didn't like Transformers Last Night because it was just they didn't see anything. They didn't see a better Transformers film compared to Age of Extinction. So maybe the Chinese audience's interest in a Bumblebee film is going downhill. And not only that, you got to remember, Chinese audiences based a lot of their entertainment value on action. This is an audience that has been watching kung fu films since the very beginning of entertainment. Okay, and what is kung fu? It's action. Jackie Chan films, old school kung fu films, all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Their films consist of a lot of action. Less talk, more action. Bumblebee actually has more talk, less action. Less of that Michael Bay style action. And when you look at the highest grossing Hollywood film in China, it's actually 2 films from the same franchise. Furious 7 and Fate of the Furious. Fate of the Furious has a $392 million from China alone, and Furious 7 has $390 million. So that's only a $2 million difference, which already tells you what kind of audience they are. They like these types of films. Bumblebee is way more emotional, it's way more dramatic, and because of that word of mouth that is going to be spread around the Chinese audiences, Bumblebee is not going to have that much of a bigger take from China. It won't. It will not take the same numbers as Transformers Last Night, and definitely not Age of Extinction, even though it is a better movie. They're just not the type of audience to appreciate things like human emotion, human connections and drama. They just don't care for that stuff. And I think it's going to hurt the Chinese box office. What can you do? It's a different type of audience. So, I'm just thinking, it cannot drop that significantly. There are Transformers fans in China. So because of that, I'm just going to predict that the Chinese box office take for Bumblebee is going to be $130 million. $130 million. So let's just say, I'm talking about the complete theatrical run. By the end of its theatrical run, $130 million combined with what they already have at $158 million, we're talking about $288 million. So that's very, very close to what it needs to make. Let's just say the break-even point is $300 million. $300 million. They've broken even. All right? They've already broken even the moment it gets released in China. Wait a minute. Japan! We forgot about Japan. Japan, which is the creator of Transformers, a lot of Transformers fans out there, they get their film released in March. In March. Japan always gets shafted when it comes to Hollywood films, and the main reason why is because they have a policy that dictates that their local domestic films get released first before they release Hollywood films. So that's why you see a lot of Hollywood films get released so much like later compared to domestic releases. I wouldn't be able to live in Japan just because as a moviegoer, a movie buff, I can't do it. I just can't wait that long. But they get their film released in March, so therefore the box office take is going to be contributed by Japan much later on. But that's just China and what we have right now. If this film makes $300 million, it's considered break-even. If this film makes $400 million, it's considered a success. If it makes $500 million, it's a huge success. And therefore, we will be getting another film in this franchise. Mark my words, we will be getting that film. And what this film is definitely not a flop. It's not a flop. Not because I said it, it's because it never was going to be a flop to begin with. We have a very, very great film here, and we have a very, very big market that loves this franchise. It's not going to be a flop, okay? But it's still not going to make the same amount of money as the previous films have made, and is definitely not helping from Aquaman. And what's happening with Aquaman and China? China, or at least the film distribution, the parties of that are connected with whatever it has to do with, they have approved the extension of Aquaman to be released in China for another month. That's unfortunate for Bumblebee, but it's great for the Chinese fans who can now watch more Aquaman. And why is this significant? Well, this is a significant blow to Bumblebee because, well, let's just put it this way. Okay, I'm going to explain this in the most general term. Let's say you decide that you want to watch both Aquaman and Bumblebee, but you have very, very little time. Okay, so you decide that, okay, well, I don't really have time to watch this. I can only watch one of them. I'll watch Aquaman. Okay, but Bumblebee's still in release. You still haven't watched yet. So 1 week comes, and another week comes, and you say, you know what? I really didn't have time this week. I'll watch it next week. So more time has passed, and then another movie is being released, and then you say, and then what's going on now? Well, your friends say, hey, let's go watch this movie. It's not called Bumblebee, but it's another movie I really want to watch. Well, I really wanted to watch Bumblebee, but okay, fine, I'll join you guys. So you see what I'm saying right now? The more time has passed, the less you want to watch a movie. And with Aquaman being in theaters for 2 whole months because of this extension in China, this definitely will hurt Bumblebee's box office take in China. Aquaman is a great film. It's an awesome film. It's an amazing film. I feel it deserves all the attention it is getting. But as a Transformers fan, I still want Bumblebee to do well, and this is definitely not going to help it. So that is really, really unfortunate. And the longer you wait to watch movies like this, the sooner, the less you'll want to watch it because it'll be out on home video release. And with the way things are going in Hollywood, home videos, I mean, movies have been being released on DVD and digital and Blu-ray like in 2.5 months later, in as early as 2.5 months later. Look at Venom. Venom got released on the first week of October, and now it's on home video release on the second week of December. That's only 2.5 months. So Bumblebee might suffer that same fate. I mean, sure, it's a good thing for people who want to own it, but for those that still want to catch it in the theater and more time has passed and more competition is in the way, it will affect whether or not they're going to end up watching it unless they make it a point to watch it on the big screen sooner than later. So there you have it. Anyways, really all I wanted to say is that Bumblebee is not a flop. Never was going to be. Okay, and I didn't have to wait till next weekend box office numbers to determine that. It's just because of the variables. When this movie was being released, December. December is when very small significant drops happen on the following week. Sometimes it even increases and more people end up watching it on the second week than the first week. So that's why December is very, very different. Aquaman did hurt Bumblebee's box office tape. Make no mistake about it. But Bumblebee was never going to be a flop. Okay? They have a really good movie here, and people are going to go watch it. There's a really good word of mouth going on right now. China's going to contribute at least $100 million, and that is definitely huge. Because all this film needs to do at the end of the day is break even at 300 and be a complete success at $400 million. I've seen sequels made after a $400 million box office worldwide take, even though their budget was $200 million. Okay, so this is significantly lower than that, so they're sitting pretty right now. Anyways, that's all I gotta say in this episode. I just really wanted to put your mind at ease that this is not a failure. This is not a failure, so don't worry about it. As always, if you enjoyed this film and you want to see more, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation. Also follow me on Twitter, @RaginNation. My name is Alex. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.